In 1944, as World War II drew toward a close and most of the world lay stunned in ruins, the United States pulled off the most spectacular backdoor maneuver in financial history at a peaceful resort town called Bretton Woods. Here, representatives from 44 nations were gathered for a high-stakes game where the U.S. held all the trump cards. Leveraging its position as the only nation owning a massive stockpile of post-war gold and left unscathed by devastation, the U.S. skillfully forced its allies to sign a historic accord, pegging their currency exchange rates to the U.S. dollar, while the U.S. committed to guaranteeing the dollar's value by exchanging it for physical gold whenever they wished at a fixed price of $35 an ounce. This perfect script turned the dollar into humanity's new standard, a global currency backed by the precious metal. Yet that trust lasted barely 3 decades until August 15, 1971, when President Richard Nixon took to the airwaves and dealt a fatal blow to the global economy by unilaterally declaring the end of converting dollars into gold. This classic betrayal, known as the Nixon shock, transformed greenbacks from gold certificates into literal fiat banknotes, backed solely by the promise of the U.S. government. From that moment on, the United States officially held the ultimate privilege, the freedom to print unlimited paper money out of thin air in exchange for oil, goods, and the most valuable real assets of the rest of the world, completing a sophisticated financial kidnapping that humanity, to this day, has still not found a way to escape. However, no empire is eternal, and this colossal financial system is beginning to show major cracks as the world gradually awakens from a long slumber. Realizing the true nature of the game of exchanging paper for real assets, many global powers and major economic blocs are actively and aggressively seeking an escape from the greenback stranglehold, igniting an unprecedented wave of de-dollarization in history. From Russia, China, and India to the expanded BRICS alliance, nations have begun shaking hands to establish local currency payment channels, abandoning the Western-controlled SWIFT system, and most notably, entering a race to hoard physical gold in record volumes by central banks. A move that tacitly confirms the world is returning to seek authentic backing rather than continuing to bet its faith on an empty promise. Additionally, the rise of digital currencies and alternative payment mechanisms is gradually eating away at the monopoly of the American currency. Nevertheless, toppling a financial order that has been deeply rooted for over 80 years is not an overnight matter, as the dollar remains the lifeblood flowing through the veins of international trade, and the U.S. stands ready to use all political and military power to protect it. The battle to reclaim humanity's economic sovereignty is entering its most grueling phase, where the world strives to break the invisible handcuffs forged in 1944 at Bretton Woods, so that no nation will ever have to toil away just to fatten a money-printing machine sitting across the ocean. This strategic tug-of-war is plunging the global financial system into its most chaotic and unpredictable phase since the Cold War. As the dollar's hegemony shakes, the U.S. is not sitting idly by, but has begun weaponizing its currency more aggressively than ever through economic sanctions and asset freezes, inadvertently accelerating the rest of the world's decoupling. The essence of the global economy is now shifting from a unipolar order, where all roads lead to Washington, into a highly fragmented multipolar landscape, with new economic alliances formed around real resources like energy, food, and high technology. In this new era, a nation's power will no longer be measured by the amount of paper money printed in accounts, but by its intrinsic manufacturing capacity and tangible material values. While the outcome of this great currency war remains a major question mark ahead, one undeniable truth stands out. The dark chapter of financial hijacking, launched from Bretton Woods in 1944, is drawing to a close, and the world will never accept returning to be obedient hostages at the foot of a throne built on the broken promises of the past. In this context, this great shift is not just a geopolitical game of superpowers, but is directly reshaping the destiny of every business and the pocket of each individual across the planet. As trust in debt-based fiat currencies erodes, humanity is witnessing a massive flight to seek new safe havens, from traditional assets with core value like gold and real estate to decentralized digital assets backed by mathematics. The gradual collapse of the old Bretton Woods system is forcing the world's top financial minds to sit down to draft a new economic structure where transparency, fairness, and intrinsic value must be prioritized rather than depending on the subjective will of any single nation. As the last bricks of the old paper money empire are shaking and decaying, a new dawn of global finance is gradually emerging. an era in which a nation's prosperity will be returned rightfully to their true sweat, labor, and resources, completely closing over 80 years of the world having to live under the overarching shadow of the century's scam called the US dollar. The closure of this historical chapter stands as the most profound wake-up call for the future of humanity regarding the true nature of power and freedom. Looking back at the journey of over 8 decades, from a peaceful conference in New Hampshire in 1944 to the fiery upheavals of the 21st century, the world has deeply learned the costly lesson that a system built on monopoly and inequality will always carry the seeds of its own self-destruction. The current great shift is not merely the replacement of one currency with another, but an evolution in human consciousness aimed at building a trade network rooted in mutual consensus and respect. As Washington's money printing press gradually loses its magic, the world will have to learn to adapt to a challenging yet fairer new order, where there is no longer room for absurd privileges or transcontinental betrayals. The battle to end the Bretton Woods era may remain protracted and thorny, but once the wheels of history have turned, they cannot be reversed, paving the way for a world where true value belongs to those who create tangible wealth, restoring integrity to the global financial flow. And from this historic turning point, a profound question is posed to all mankind. When the shadow of the dollar vanishes, will we step into an era of peace and prosperity or an all-out financial chaos? The answer lies in the choices made by nations in reshaping the new rules of the game, where blockchain technology, central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, and multilateral currency baskets stand ready to replace the vacuum left by the greenback. No longer manipulated by a single center of power, global capital flows will be redistributed more equitably, forcing every economy to stand firmly on its own feet through internal strength, creativity, and actual labor productivity. The legacy of Bretton Woods will ultimately be nothing more than a classic textbook lesson on the rise and fall of a financial empire built on illusion, a testament to the fact that no borrowed power can last forever when it goes against the common interests of the entire world. The road ahead may be fraught with bumps and conflicts, but that is the price to pay for humanity to officially step out of the 1944 kidnapping room, writing with its own hands a new page of history that is free, transparent, and fair for the global economy. Now, as the final shackles of the old order are gradually breaking, the world begins to witness the very first bricks of a new economic ecosystem being laid down. Alliances no longer look toward the West for approval, but instead establish their own axis of development, where strategic resources such as lithium, semiconductors, clean energy, and artificial intelligence become new standards, more solid than any paper currency. This great transfer of power not only reshapes the geopolitical chessboard, but is also a necessary purification to return all economic values to their true original nature. When the thick fog of the dollar illusion completely vanishes, humanity will realize that genuine prosperity does not stem from the privileges of infinite money printing, but is nurtured by connectivity, transparency, and mutual respect for sovereignty. The chronicle of the Bretton Woods Agreement, from a powerful beginning, a shocking betrayal, to consequences lasting an entire century, has finally come to an end, opening a hopeful new chapter where the world no longer holds financial hostages and the flow of human prosperity will be guided by the very hands of genuine laborers across the planet. In that new era of high autonomy, the mindset of nations is shifting from passive defense to active creation. People are no longer talking about how to survive under the sanctions of a unipolar financial system, but are discussing how to build multipolar trade corridors safe and inviolable. Younger generations, entrepreneurs, and tech minds across the globe are now together aiming toward a further vision, a fully decentralized finance, where no single nation has the right to unilaterally impose the rules of the game or turn others' assets into tools for political blackmail. The collapse of the Bretton Woods illusion is not the end of development, but a comprehensive liberation for global productive capacity, breaking the long-standing monopoly to make room for a level playing field. History has turned the page, and though the road to reshaping the future financial system will still have unpredictable fluctuations and challenges, the world has officially stepped out of the era of false promises, ready to embrace a global economic order more transparent, fair, and sustainable than ever before. The inevitable consequence of this awakening is a reshaping of individual mindsets in modern society, where citizens are no longer innocent bystanders to central bank decisions. As the money printing machine that once manipulated the world loses its magic, capital flows towards substantive and sustainable values, forcing economies to focus on improving human life, protecting the environment, and developing core technologies instead of rushing into meaningless financial speculation spirals. The collapse of an order built on coercion in 1944 is the most eloquent proof that trust cannot be kidnapped forever by authority or force. Entering a future without the shadow of the Bretton Woods conductor's baton, humanity not only reclaims the integrity of money, but also reaffirms an eternal truth of history. A genuine and enduring prosperity can only be built on the foundation of freedom, justice, and the tangible contribution of every nation on the planet.